Hello, my dear friends. Get ready for a spine-chilling adventure, where the past is brought back to haunt those who were cursed. In the year 1127, a noble knight from the Crusades was buried in English soil, along with a mysterious red object. The story behind this relic remained a mystery until modern times, when, during excavation for a new subway system, a construction team unearthed an ancient underground cemetery. Resting there were the remains of various knights, some of whom lay beneath the waters of the River Thames. Historians and archaeologists speculated that these warriors may have joined expeditions to Egypt before returning to England. The renowned archaeologist Henry Jekyll, upon learning of the discovery, quickly took charge of the dig. For him, this site promised to uncover a secret he had been investigating for years: the enigma of Princess Amanet. Amanet, daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh, was a woman of breathtaking beauty and fierce determination. Destined to succeed her father and revered almost as a goddess, her fate changed abruptly with the birth of a brother, redirecting the line of succession. Feeling rejected and betrayed, Amanet plotted a devastating revenge against her own lineage. She made a dark pact with Set, the Egyptian deity embodying chaos and death. Set promised Amanet the power she needed to carry out her vengeance, and in return, she would help bring the goddess into the mortal world. However, before Amanet could fulfill her part of the sinister deal, she was captured and mummified alive by priests who condemned her for her sins, hiding her body in a secret location far from Egypt. In the present day, amidst the desert heat, we meet Sergeant Nick Morton and Corporal Chris of the American Army, assigned by Henry Jekyll to locate Amanet's tomb. This mission, shrouded in secrecy, becomes increasingly dangerous as it unfolds in a region overrun by armed insurgents. Chris hesitates, fearing the high risk, but Nick persuades him to press on. In the middle of their mission, they find themselves cornered in a fierce gunfight, with no choice but to call in an airstrike to neutralize the insurgent threat. The bombing, though chaotic, ends up revealing the entrance to Amanet's tomb, with Nick narrowly escaping the ground as it opens up beneath his feet. When Colonel Greenway, Nick and Chris's superior, arrives at the scene, he suspects them of abusing their military privileges to dig and traffic relics illegally. Nick and Chris defend themselves, arguing that they were there to protect local residents from insurgents. At the height of this tense exchange, Jenny Halsey, an archaeologist contracted by the military, steps in and, without hesitation, confronts Nick with a slap. Jenny reveals that she spent the night with Nick in Baghdad, only to later discover that he had stolen a valuable map from her. Now, as they stand before a hole in the ground, her surprise grows when she notices Egyptian characteristics in the tomb, an unusual finding since they are in territory historically belonging to Persia. Assertively, she explains to Greenway that her role there is to ensure the protection of priceless artifacts, which could be worth fortunes, and she determines to explore the tomb. Greenway gives strict orders for Nick and Chris to accompany Jenny down into the tomb, emphasizing that the trio has a 2-hour limit to complete their exploration. As they enter the underground chamber, Nick quickly notices drops of mercury falling from the ceiling. Jenny clarifies that according to ancient Egyptian beliefs, mercury was used to ward off evil spirits. Following an intricate system of channels filled with the liquid metal, they reach a secondary chamber. While Jenny makes her observations, Chris, taking advantage of a moment of distraction, begins to steal jewels from the skeletons present. Jenny, increasingly intrigued, notes the peculiar position of the guardian statues, facing the mercury pool rather than pointing outward. She deduces that the site is not an ordinary tomb but rather a type of prison, where chains leading to the mercury pool were not for rescue, but for containment. The situation becomes more complex when Greenway reports via radio that insurgents have been spotted nearby, and they need to evacuate immediately. Jenny refuses to leave without discovering what lies submerged in the mercury. The argument intensifies but is interrupted when Nick operates a pulley mechanism, releasing the submerged object. A sarcophagus emerges. At that moment, spiders begin emerging from cracks in the cave, one of them biting Chris, who reacts by firing his gun in panic. Nick calms him, assuring that the spiders are not venomous. Suddenly, as he looks at the sarcophagus, Nick is overcome by a vision of Amanet, who tells him that he is the chosen one to free her. Shaken by the experience, he is brought back to reality by Jenny, who insists on taking the sarcophagus with them. Nick, still under the impact of the vision, communicates the decision to Greenway, who arranges for a helicopter to transport the sarcophagus. As the sarcophagus is lifted, Nick notices ravens seemingly following it. The group then heads to a landing strip, where a sandstorm begins to form. They board the plane, carrying the mysterious relic. During the flight back, Chris's condition deteriorates, though it goes unnoticed by the others. On the plane, Nick tries to reconnect with Jenny, confessing that despite stealing the map, his feelings for her are genuine. Faced with these revelations, Jenny remains distant and cold. To her, the trade of archaeological artifacts that Nick practices is a direct affront to the meaning and importance of her life devoted to archaeology. While she carefully examines the ancient inscriptions on the sarcophagus, revealing the saga of Amanet, Nick is seized by intense visions in which he sees himself as the human instrument Amanet chose to invoke, set into the world. Driven by an irrational impulse, Chris tries to force open the sarcophagus with a knife. Greenway intervenes quickly, but in a fit of pure rage, Chris stabs him. He then turns to attack Nick and the others, forcing Nick to make a drastic decision and shoot Chris. As Chris falls, thousands of crows appear, as if summoned by an unseen force, crashing against the plane and destroying its windows and engines. The plane plunges toward England. Amid the ensuing chaos, Nick, in a final act of desperation, manages to put a parachute on Jenny and pushes her out of the plane, saving her as he and the other soldiers tragically descend. In the aftermath of the crash, a still-shaken Jenny is called to identify the bodies. Meanwhile, in the morgue, Nick inexplicably returns to life inside a body bag, surprised by his own resurrection. Next to him, he sees Chris, who seems to challenge him to understand what is happening, even though only Nick can see him. At the same time, two police officers investigating the crash site discover the sarcophagus. Driven by curiosity, one of them opens it, finding Amanet's mummy, who promptly attacks him, draining his life. As she does so, Amanet's appearance is restored, and the same happens to the other officer, whose bodies now obey her commands. Nick and Jenny, seeking answers in a bar, discuss the inexplicable. Jenny theorizes that Amanet, an Egyptian princess, was completely erased from historical records. She believes Amanet attempted to use a special dagger with a jewel in its hilt, the dagger of Set, to carry out her dark ritual. Archaeologists suspect that the jewel was separated from the dagger and later stolen by crusaders, who buried it with one of their knights in a recently discovered tomb. Jenny suspects that by unearthing these relics, they may have awakened an ancient power and angered the gods. Nick struggles to maintain his sanity as he continues to see Chris in reflections and shadows, a constant reminder of Amanet's curse. In a moment of introspection, he confronts the image of Chris in the bathroom mirror, where he is faced with a harsh reality. They are cursed, and the visions are only the beginning unless they follow Amanet's plan. Meanwhile, a worried Jenny keeps in touch with Henry, who advises her to bring Nick to him, keeping the soldier partly in the dark about his true intentions. Nick is haunted by an apocalyptic vision where Amanet commands armies of rats. Jenny promptly rescues him from a near-car accident, reinforcing the idea that, somehow, the gods have indeed been angered. Torn between the rational and the supernatural, Nick considers mercury poisoning as the cause of his visions, but insists on confronting the sarcophagus to prove to himself that it's all an illusion. Meanwhile, Amanet continues to regain her strength by absorbing more victims' life forces, getting closer and closer to her original powerful form. When they arrive at the scene of the accident, Jenny approaches the sarcophagus, while Nick is mysteriously drawn toward a nearby church. Inside the sanctuary, he encounters another vision of Amanet, but soon finds himself physically trapped, surrounded by the princess's resurrected slaves. Determined to complete her ritual, Amanet reveals Set's dagger by destroying a statue, but when she attempts to finish the ritual, she realizes the vital jewel for the spell's success is missing. Frustrated, she hesitates, and Jenny arrives at the church. This distraction allows Nick to fight off the mummies and escape with Jenny. During their escape, Jenny theorizes that Amanet has some mental control over Nick, something he is reluctant to accept until he inadvertently finds himself driving back toward the church, a disturbing testament to the princess's influence over him. As they attempt to escape again, they are chased by the mummies, resulting in a crash that leaves them vulnerable. Amanet approaches to finish what she started, but just as the situation seems hopeless, a group armed with specialized technology intervenes, saving them. Nick loses consciousness and awakens in an unknown location, facing Dr. Henry Jekyll, the leader of Prodigium. The organization, dedicated to combating supernatural threats, reveals itself as Jenny's true employer. Dr. Jekyll, struggling with his own curse, administers a serum to maintain his humanity. Henry explains to Nick that they have captured Amanet, and intend to inject her with liquid mercury, which will paralyze and kill her. Amanet tempts Nick with the promise of immortality and ultimate power over life and death if he allows Set to possess him. She dreams of being his queen, ruling the world by his side. As the mercury starts to take effect, Nick enters a trance and desperately begs Henry to stop the process, intriguing him. Meanwhile, Henry's team finds the essential jewel for the dagger. Meanwhile, Amanet questions the presence of the dagger, the jewel, and her chosen one, Nick, all in the same place, suggesting a larger plan at play. Jenny realizes that Henry intends to let Set possess Nick, only to kill him while he is still human. She confronts Henry, who reveals that Nick is cursed, and therefore doomed either way. Furious, Nick forces Henry to consider a new plan, drinking the serum that transforms him into his evil side, known as Hyde. Jenny and a guard flee as the room seals, but Nick is trapped inside. Elsewhere, Amanet manipulates a technician to escape. Nick defeats Hyde and administers the serum, which leaves Henry unconscious. Jenny returns, insisting they must destroy the jewel in the Crusader's tomb to break the curse. They set off, but Amanet summons a sandstorm, separating the pair. Chris appears, guiding Nick under false pretenses, attempting to deliver him to Amanet. Amanet resurrects the Crusader Knights, who help her recover the jewel in the subway. They attack Jenny, but Nick saves her just in time. However, they are thrown against a wall and dragged into a flooded area of the cemetery. Nick rescues Jenny once again, but Amanet drags her into the depths of the waters. Nick tries to follow but fails to hold his breath. Upon returning, he finds Jenny floating, motionless. He fights off more mummies to reach her, finally bringing her to the surface, but it's too late. Jenny is already dead. Amanet appears, attempting to console Nick, urging him to forget Jenny and accept her love. However, when she realizes he can't take his eyes off Jenny's body, Amanet, frustrated, punishes him. During the confrontation, Nick cleverly manages to steal her dagger. As he is about to destroy the gemstone in the dagger, Amanet stops him, reminding him that if he allows Set to possess him, he could control life and death. At that moment, Nick realizes this might be his only chance to bring Jenny back. In a bold move, he stabs himself, allowing Set to take control of his body. Now possessed, Nick, dominated by Set, declares his love for Amanet. However, seeing Jenny lying there, something within him struggles against Set's influence. Nick regains control of himself and uses Set's powers to drain Amanet's life and transfer it to Jenny, bringing her back to life. Hey there, dear friends. This summary is from the movie The Mummy. Have you watched it? Comment, very good. So we know you really enjoyed it and followed along until the very end. Now let's continue. Jenny wakes up, confused, searching for Nick. She finds him hiding in the shadows, and as she approaches, he, fearful and torn between his human nature and Set's influence, begs her to stay away, uncertain of who he is or what he's capable of anymore. He confesses his love and his wish for them to have had more time together before disappearing, just as Henry and his men approach. Henry and Jenny discuss Nick's whereabouts, with Henry warning that he's become a monster, but still with a human side that drives him to seek a cure across the world. In the vastness of Egypt, we see Nick preparing to ride through the desert toward the pyramids, accompanied by Chris, whom he has also resurrected. The two move through the desert, shrouded by a massive sandstorm, a mark of his new and mysterious power. And thus, Nick's journey in search of healing and redemption begins, and the movie ends. If you enjoyed this movie, I recommend watching this other one here too. I'm sure you'll love it. See you there.